I say prescient incendi. The United States has granted the Philippines their independence.
Swears in Vice President Sergio Osmeña as
If a
president.
prosperous and free democracy can be built in the Philippines,
The Republic of the Philippines
Ang akong kasing-kasing niawit.
The hard election drive pays off and Macapagal wins.
Taking the entire Philippines under martial law.
I have always been a firm advocate of peace.
We are today being hailed as the new Asian Tiger Cup.
walang kaibigan, walang kumpare.
A strong republic is the bedrock.
Kayo ang boss ko.
Do not destroy my country because I will kill you.
We always point at Ramon Magsaysay as the man of the masses because people always have this impression that he was not so rich, he was poor because they said that he was a mechanic. But, you know, remember that even if Ramon Magsaysay was a mechanic, he was actually part of a landed elite in Zambales. Okay? They're not very, very rich, but they were landed. The real poor president was Diosdado Macapagal.
Macapagal had always pushed himself as the poor boy from Lubao because he came from that part of Lubao, Pampanga. Although it was rich in farmlands and everything, but of course the plight of the farmers during those times were not, of course, well off. You know? So basically he grew up from being a poor boy. He was basically did not have enough, you know, to study and everything. But he eventually excelled in his studies. He took up his elementary school in the town, in Lubao, and eventually he would also go to high school in Pampanga. No? Like every other student during that time, no? Studying in Manila was a big thing for them.
Talagang mahirap po yung kanilang buhay when he was born here in Lubao. Yung father niya po ay isang farmer and then yung mother niya po ay labandera po siya. So para makakope up po siya, yung kanyang father po ay director po siya ng zarzuela. Nagra-write po sila ng zarzuela or the musical plays po during that time. So kasama po siyang nagsusulat, kaya po siya natutong magsulat ng poetry. And doon na rin po niya nakilala yung kanyang first wife, which is Purita de la Rosa.
And then there was a philanthropist who took care of him, Don Honore Ventura, who died a poor man. He really gave his wealth away. And he was able to study in Manila, even take up law. And he was a bar top notcher. So for him, education was very important.
You have to also to consider that at that time he was also studying law. Since he was a college graduate already, he was already working as a civil servant. So like any other law student today, no, walang nagpo-full-time law di ba? Like him, nag-aaral siya, at the same time nagtatrabaho din. Apparently, he was already a shining star at that time because of his probably popularity in Pampanga, and of course, he was working in the government. From what I learned, that he eventually would become partners with President Quirino. No? Eventually, he would start first, of course, in working at Congress. Just working, no? He wasn't a politician yet. No? But eventually, he was such a standout. Quirino would invite him, of course, to join the LP, the Liberal Party, and eventually he would become one of the promising politicians of that time.
President Quirino, at that time Vice President and Secretary of Foreign Affairs, took him to become one of his assistants, he actually was the one who negotiated from the British the return of Turtle Islands to the Philippines. At a very early age. This was early in his career. And then, eventually, he served as second secretary to the Embassy of the United States in Washington, where he also was part of the negotiations and a signatory of the Mutual Defense Treaty, which is still the backbone of U.S.-Philippines foreign relations.
Hindi niya naisip na pumasok sa politics. Naging inspiration lang niya si President Roxas and President Quirino para makapasok sa politics. And then, yun nga, kinonvince siya ni President Quirino to run for a Congress seat. Yun nga lang, against siya kay Amado Yuson, which is his friend. Magkasama sila sa Inka Timawan, editor siya. And then, pareho silang poet. Yun nga lang, sila yung dalawa yung nagkalaban.
I'm Diosdado Macapagal Salgado. Of the grandchildren, I'm the first grandson. I'm the third grandchild. Someone suggested, why don't you try politics? And even tasked to run against a friend of his. I believe at that time was a non-communist. During that era, if you're not a Democrat or something, you're a communist, di ba? No such thing as left-leaning. Red or not, ganun lang yon. But there was a friend of his, if I remember the stories well, they never hit each other. They partook in a zarzuela contest. Both were poets. My grandfather's 2 poems published. So they do zarzuela. So I guess the better poet got the more votes. Rogelio de la Rosa, his brother-in-law, was known to be a good actor, bida lagi. But during their days, Rogelio de la Rosa was a contra. Diosdado Macapagal was a bida because he was a playwright as well. So at an early age, he really loved poetry.
Eventually, he became congressman. And when he became congressman, there's one story where the fiery mayor of Manila, Mayor Arsenio Lacson, was being questioned by Congressman Macapagal. And they were friends, okay? Pero nagkainitan. Macapagal was asking questions, insisting on something, and Mayor Lacson doesn't want to answer. Naghamunan ng suntukan. And you know what happened? Macapagal, I mean, let's get out. I'm going to accept your challenge. They went out and, you know, the reporters were so nervous. And then they faced each other in the other room, and then they suddenly laughed. They were telling each other, no, I cannot believe that you actually accepted my proposal to fight you. And yeah, I was also afraid, etc. So it ended up in a laugh, and of course, in the end, they were friends.
I think one of the incentives of him becoming a politician was that even like any other politician, they always had this dream or understanding that they could help their fellow man. And at that time, many of them would eventually try to accomplish that dream by, of course, becoming a politician. Because if you're a politician, you have more contact with the people, and since you have the basic power of the land, you have all the power, of course, to do everything within your power to help the people. And I think that pushed him to do that. Remember that his political campaign when he ran for the presidency was, of course, a champion of the masses, no? Because, tulad ng sinabi ko kanila, may pinanggalingan siya. He knows the conditions of how to probably relieve the poverty of the masses.
The funny thing about that was that President Garcia did not give him any job. And he put him in an office where there is problem in air conditioning.
I think ang naging problema din dun sa term ni Carlos P. Garcia was that it was the first time na lalalo ang vice president from another party, tapos the president was from another party.
So one of his dreams really was to free the farmer. There's still the farm owner who would not agree to that. So he was not anti-elite. He was just pro-poor.
eventually, he became vice president, the very first one to come from another party. And, you know, the funny thing about that was that President Garcia did not give him any job. And he put him in an office where there is problem in air conditioning. You know, Macapagal was like feeling that, you know, I am an unwanted guest in Malacanang. You know, remember before that the vice president always had his offices in Malacanang. And then he felt that Garcia doesn't want him there because you put him in an office where there is, you know, problem in air conditioning. And so, what happened? At that time, Garcia was a nationalista. You have Macapagal as a liberal, and he was vice president of the Philippines. He was the president of the Liberal Party, and he's got nothing to do. So what did he do? He campaigned. So he used this time campaigning around the country. Of course, undeclared yet.
It was the first time na lalalo ang vice president from another party, tapos the president was from another party. In fact, they were bitter, I wouldn't say just opposing, but bitterly opposing parties. So what happened during that time was he traveled a lot. He made sure that he knew the layout of the country. And of course, it was during these travels that he saw the problems, so that he felt at that time was not being tackled by President Garcia. And of course, you have to realize, ang presidency at that time, 4 years lang. You know? So I think he took that time talaga to lay down his plan. I mean, 4 years at that time is just a short period, no? He managed to lay out his plans and eventually would challenge Garcia for the presidency.
The people of the Philippines make their decision whether to elect Liberal Party candidate Diosdado Macapagal as president or retain incumbent Carlos Garcia. Macapagal has been waging a 4-year campaign while serving in the Garcia administration as vice president. The hard election drive pays off and Macapagal wins.
During that time, kinontinue lang niya yung kanyang mga projects sa Pampanga, which is the agricultural reform. Pero dati ay province-wide lang siya, Pampanga lang. So this time, it's nationwide na. So buong Pilipinas na po ito. And yung rural health law po na tinatawag, which is yung mga health centers po sa iba-ibang part ng Philippines. Nagro-roam po yung ating mga doctors and nurses para maabot po yung mga urban poor or yung mga hindi po naaabot ng mga health centers.
Ang focus kasi ng kanyang term was to alleviate poverty. That was his #1 program. There was many programs that he eventually would try to make that would economically alleviate the poverty of the masses. For example, he promoted free enterprise where he said that actually emphasized that the development of the economy would not just be done by the government, that there should be, of course, a participatory role of the private businessmen. And of course, he did that. He managed to do that by granting incentives, of course, for the businessmen in order to develop also the economy under, of course, the guidance and the policies of the government. Then, of course, land reform, he eventually pushed it. He had a very difficult time with land reform because in spite of the LP being the party of the presidency, Congress at that time was unfortunately NP. But eventually, he managed to get a lot of his fellow politicians who were on the opposite party to join him. He managed to get swing votes in Congress because of probably his relations with a lot of the politicians, that he managed to talk to them, to influence them, and eventually agree to a lot of his principles.
Lolo was the son of a poor farmer. The mother side, the Pangan side, they were farmers. They're still farming until now at Lubao. And he knows how it is to get hungry. Mahina ang ani, not enough food to go around, and then you're taking care of land that's not yours. You only get a small share. So one of his dreams really was to free the farmer. There's still the farm owner who would not agree to that. So he was not anti-elite. He was just pro-poor. You had what other presidents were not able to emulate, yung kanyang poor man's day. Every Friday, just fall in line, you'll be able to talk to the president. So no cabinet meetings, no official businesses on Friday. That's for the poor man, that's for the citizens. From Malacanang, yung pila nasa Cubao. He did that, and he had these cabinet secretaries with him. So pag may problem, you take care of that, you take care of this, in front of the guy. Before they go home, the problem is solved.
Hilarion Henares eventually said that Macapagal is one of the 3 best presidents of the country. What our economists were always saying that Macapagal is the best president in terms of economy. There's an American historian. His name is Louis Glick. Louis Glick, if you're going to look at his presidential biographies, he was critical on the presidents. Like, he always brings out all the controversies. But he was also the one who said that Macapagal is actually the best president, the most competent president of the Third Republic. But what happened? Even Glick recognized that there was a big perception of corruption during the time of Macapagal when, of course, during the Stonehill controversy, the one who's pursuing the case, Secretary Jose Jocno, he actually fired him. And so why would you do that if you want to stop? It's like that's when some people felt that, oh, he was not probably sincere about fighting corruption.
The investigation was made, and of course, many of Stonehill's papers was seized as evidence by the NBI, and one of them allegedly was the so-called Blue Book. It was a small leather-bound notebook that contained the names of several more politicians, along with the prize that were supposed to be given to them by Stonehill as a payoff. The one thing that floated, of course, was Macapagal's name was also in the so-called notebook.
You as a leader should be responsible at what level corruption should be. So he got rid of the guy, lessened the level of corruption. So very honest, and integrity was unquestionable.
48 years ago, the mantle of American sovereignty fell over this land and this people. It was the beneficent sovereignty of a liberator, pledged to be withdrawn as soon as the well-being of the people would safely permit. America never wavered in that purpose. America today redeems that pledge.
President John F. Kennedy extended an invitation to President Macapagal to visit America, a state visit there, so that in America, when he was there, they're going to sign. He's going to receive that aid from America. But what happened? The American Congress did not approve the bill. And of course, people would remember that we were with America. We fought with America side by side during the war. We were enemies with Japan, and we defended democracy from Japanese tyranny. And then here you are, you're actually helping Japan rise, and you refuse the Philippines rehabilitation. Of course, there's a national sentiment there, resentment against America. So, upon learning this development, he said, I'm canceling the trip to America. And Macapagal brought up the idea that he's changing our Independence Day from July 4 to June 12. He was, of course, supported here by some historians.
He signed a law that would eventually transfer the Independence Day from July 4 to June 12. It got held up in Congress kasi it has to pass the congressional approval. Nung una, akala niya it was being held up because, alam mo na, yung away-away lang nila. And they eventually had to talk to Jerry Rojas, the son of Manuel Rojas, who was of course a senator at that time. And he wanted to ask a clarification why the approval was being held up. Ang sinabi lang sa kanya kasi ni Jerry Rojas, remember, his father was the one who became the first President of the Third Republic, ayaw nilang basta palitan yung date na walang kapalit para marespeto pa rin yung July 4. And they finally came to an agreement to make July 4 what they call Memorial Day. Okay? July 4 was Memorial Day, June 12 was Independence Day. And eventually, July 4 would become what we know before as Phil-American Friendship Day. What was very, I think, very honorable at that time because the first Independence Day ceremony was done on June 12, 1963. Aguinaldo was still alive. You know, in fact, it was like 6 months, I think it was 8 months before he died. He was still alive at that time. So it was really a big honor also for the first president of the Philippines to attend the actual first June 12 Independence Day parade.
What Macapagal did was to recognize what Filipino historians had been saying, that we actually got our independence when we became free from the Spaniards, except that the Americans took away that independence and only brought it back in 1946. And this is to recognize the founding fathers of our country, Rizal, Bonifacio, Aguinaldo.
I think ang nagpasira talaga yung last few years eh.
Macapagal should be recognized as one of our most competent presidents. We should be looking and reading at his books.
He did not become president to be rich or to be famous. He came to serve.
So remember that he was a diplomat early in his career. And so when he was president, he made the claim for the Sultanate of Sulu, which is now part of the Philippine government, for Sabah. Well, of course, it has to be clarified that it's not the whole of Sabah. Kota Kinabalu is not included, only the upper part where Sandakan is. Of course, this kind of increased the level of tension with the country's relationship with Malaya or Malaysia. But in a way, a genius, a diplomatic genius, because eventually he also tried to organize our neighbors into the Mafilindo.
That was ironic, because almost at that same time, we started our Philippine claim to Sabah. Malaysia at that time was already cooperating with the Philippines with regards to the creation of Mafilindo, the foreign relations group of that later became the precursor of the ASEAN. Then after doing that, he suddenly laid claim now to Sabah. And medyo nagkagulo na yung relasyon doon kasi I think na-disappoint nilang Malaysia dahil kala nila tapos na yung sa claim na yun. Historically, and I've always believed that Sabah was ours. It has always been ours, but of course, it wasn't ours as part of the government, but as part of Philippine territory under the Sultanate of Sulu. And of course, being under the Sultanate at that time technically means that it is a territory of the Philippines.
Las banderas saludan en el aeropuerto de Barajas al avión presidencial Sampaguita, nombre de la flor nacional de Filipinas, en el que llega a España su excelencia el jefe del Estado filipino, Diosdado Macapagal.
Ospite di Roma, il presidente delle Filippine. Diosdado Macapagal giunge a Fiumicino.
You know, we always remember when some people would say that during the time of another president whose name starts with M, we were number 2 in Asia. It was actually Macapagal who did that. So here you are, you have, the economy was working, you basically have a very competent president. So you have a very good story going here. But unfortunately, how do you defeat that good story? You have to get a better narrative. And that better narrative was Marcos. So when Marcos, who was part of the president's party, wanted to run against him, because, you know, they were claiming that Macapagal actually had an agreement with Marcos that I'm going to only have one term and you will have the other term. When Marcos felt that he's not going to fulfill this, he went to the other party. He ran as part of the Nacionalista Party.
Marcos would win by a landslide. Macapagal was going to be pushed back in the sideline. I remember this story that was told to me by national artist F. Shinurase. During the time of the start of the Marcos presidency, there was this inaugural ball in Malacanang Palace, and the people, of course, were coming up to the Marcoses and everything, and greeting him and everything. He would notice one person sitting on one side of the hall. He was holding a glass of champagne, but he was just basically standing there and looking at the entire proceedings. Yung matandang daw ito, walang pumapansin. As in, he was standing there, walang pumapansin. He was standing all alone, wala na kumakausap. Jose would come up to him, of course, started a conversation with him. The man was Macapagal.
He did not become president to be rich or to be famous. He came to serve. We should, I guess, have more of those kind of people. You don't run for office just because you protect your wealth, your family, your name. You don't run for office because you're popular, and yet you sit there wasting taxpayers' money and you're not doing anything.
You know, he exemplified that honesty is the best policy, that there was once a New Year's speech that when he actually confessed that it was not working as well as he wanted it to work, his administration. It was called the mea culpa speech, and he was bashed by everybody. He said, you should not say sorry. But he felt that he wanted to be honest, that he wanted to do more, and that he was not able to fulfill some of the things that he promised. And that's where you can see how far Macapagal would go to being honest. And of course, you're going to say that his daughter also said sorry. I am sorry.
Marami siyang tinuro outside of being a president. It's the practice of getting there. One is, he said, always take care of your people. Make sure busog sila. Bakit po? Kasi kahit may pera yan, pag gutom yan, iiwan ka. Diba? So, tiyan muna. Bago prinsipyo, tiyan muna.
Diosdado Macapagal described Macapagal as a father. He said, you know, he never spanked me, never yelled at me. When she did something wrong, she would only take her, talk to her privately. So, ibig sabihin, hindi niya pinapahiya yung mga anak niya.
I think ang nagpasira talaga yung last few years eh. But in the initial years talaga, he was really striving to alleviate poverty in the Philippines. Siguro nakakalimutan din yung ibang ginawa niya dahil sinasabi ng iba, ginagawa rin naman tuloy ibang pangulo eh. Diba? It's the way probably that he does it would become unforgettable. But in this case, walang binago eh.
Macapagal should be recognized as one of our most competent presidents. We should be looking and reading at his books. But he was not as colorful as Marcos, for example, or even Cory Aquino. That's why we still fight for them until now.
He was a statesman. He was an economist. He was a lawyer. He should have integrity, unquestionable. He should have honesty. And no scandals on women. I still have to see what my kids have to say later on. Because when their classmates find out that they're the grandnephew or the great-grandson, they get shy. And those that finally realize that, oh, this guy is great-grandson, they suddenly remember there was a president such as Diosdado Macapagal. Sometimes that's good enough for me. Yeah.